All right, I blew this up so I wouldn't have to wear my glasses to read it. Mr. Mark.
Yep, that's me.
I wrote questions I knew you knew the answers to.
You can actually write questions I don't know the answers to.
That's fun too. Well, if this was a different format, I would have done that.
You know what? I'm pretty open.
I know you are.
Yeah, I don't try to be.
No, you don't. You are so comfortable in your skin. I think that's what's so attractive.
Or I'm really comfortable about saying I'm not comfortable in my skin.
That is a degree of comfort right there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe that's true. Yeah.
So you tell me when you're ready.
The first thing is if we can just get you to introduce yourself to Mark Bradford here in the Mark Bradford and Papers exhibition at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth.
Okay.
And then Terri, you take it away right after that.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Mark Bradford, and I'm in Fort Worth at the Fort Worth Modern to introduce my show, which is Mark Bradford and Papers.
You told Christopher Bedford in your interview for the exhibition Tomorrow is Another Day that the grid saved your life. Since the grid is a prominent feature in the early work seen in Mark Bradford in Papers, can you talk about the significance and evolution of it throughout your career?
It's interesting because the grid did save my life. When I was in art school, you would always hear the critique of the grid and people wanting to break out of the grid and how the grid was getting in the way of painting. And I actually, when I first started, I was thinking the same thing until actually I started to apply the grids under my work. And I had this really emotional reaction to it. I felt safe. But I realized that in my personal life growing up, everything was always in flux, constantly in flux, constantly in flux. And there was an unstableness that I kind of felt on a personal and emotional level. But the grid, in a way, when I say saved my life, it gave me a foundation to start making work from. And so I never fought it. I kind of was always comfortable working with it. I was comfortable navigating it and moving it and pushing it forward, but it never was something that I wish wasn't there. Because if it wasn't there, then I would go back to this kind of instability, things that I couldn't control, things that were kind of put on me. I still look around and like the grid and form, yeah. And had a relationship to architecture, I think, which again, structures and form and foundations. Never had a problem with it.
Okay, 2, it has been said that while your work isn't representational, it represents. Can you talk about how abstraction gets to personal experience, community, and more in your work?
Well, a wise woman told me that you don't make work autobiographically, but you make it with your life. And I thought that was brilliant, actually. Brilliant. The way she just put that in was brilliant. And I actually believe that 100%. You always have to have a roommate. It's like a roommate. It really comes down to, I guess, intention. It's sort of intention and how much you're willing to reveal and how much you don't want to reveal. And it's like a delicate walk between the two. Oftentimes I rely on the material and the memory of the material to do a little bit of the work for me. I also rely a little bit on the subject matter to do a little bit of the political work for me. And then I also give myself the freedom of abstraction to go wherever I need to go so that I'm not a spokesman for something.
This brings me to language. You have said that titles are my language. You also incorporate words and broken text in your work, which seems to operate poetically, suggesting and questioning without telling. Give us some insight into your use and attraction to language in your work.
I always like language. Well, language is different than text. I like language because I like how we use it and misuse it and remaster it. I love language. I love the oral ways in which it transfers, the way stories transfer from person to Instagram, back to TikTok, back to, having a conversation at Starbucks about Mark Bradford's In Paper show. Like, these connections and interruptions, I really, really like that. Maybe I started loving the use of language when I grew up in the hair salon, and I'd have all these adventures all in the world. I would travel so much, and I'd come back to the hair salon. I really wanted to share them. So you really, by sharing the story, you don't sit down and say, well, on March 16th, I went to the Louvre, and what I saw at the Louvre, oh, Mark, that's boring. Tell it again. And actually what I realized is they were like, come on, take us on a voyage. And then you start again and say, oh girl, I went to this nightclub the night before, had too much to drink, met this, oh, okay, here we go. Bring people in. Language can bring people in. We can, with tone and the way in which we say what we're saying, you can play with temperature and language and the way you enunciate certain things and pull back from certain things. I love all of that. That for me is it's a delicate dance of language. And it's a delicate dance because if you don't do it right, it can fall into misinterpretation. And so I really love that. Sometimes I notice I don't text very well because I can't get the way I talk to make the text, and I can't text fast enough. And texting, I'm always fascinated by text messages because oftentimes I'll receive a text message from someone and I wouldn't think that text message would belong to that person. It's maybe super, super youthful, or they use a lot of emojis, and I wouldn't think that person would use emojis. Oh, wow, they use... Just interesting. Just the way we use language has always fascinated me. When it comes to the paintings, sometimes I'd pull from language, sometimes I'd pull from a little conversation, sometimes I'd pull from what I'm reading. Early on, it really was pulling from music. I moved away from music to just slang sometimes. It just depends. It has no direct, and oftentimes when I use language in my work, I tend to repeat the same phrase over. It's like an exclamation, like daddy, 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 or DNA testing. It's because there's an urgency, so I'll just repeat the same thing, or a slogan, James Brown is dead. And those just jump out at me.
Zadie Smith writes in the Tomorrow is a New Day catalog, quote, turning utility into pleasure is a deep, rich theme in your work. Can you talk about her observation as well as the relationship of material to content in your work?
Yeah. Turning utility into pleasure. Utility, yeah. I mean, I've always worked with things that have a use, things that have a utility, things that belong to the world. Even if I use paint, I usually probably still won't go to the art store to buy the paint. I'll still go to Home Depot. I guess I just like use value, things that have use value. But at the same time, I like to kind of wrestle with changing that use to something else. I may go to Home Depot, I may go to the streets to get paper down, I may get a merchant poster, but when I drag it into the studio and kind of close the door, it's not, quote unquote, the modernism's idea of the hermetically sealed studio where nothing gets in. No, I bring a lot in, but then I close the door and I try to inscribe it with another language that's more personal, which maybe has to do with where I'm trying to make the material go. And that's sometimes a little bit of a struggle. It wants to go one place and I want to go another place, and so we kind of do the tug of war a little bit. I think that the work of art always has to win. the work of art, not the site where the material comes from. They're very different. And so it's just really a back and forth until the work of art stands in front of me. But I think that the struggle back and forth, that's where the hope comes from. I necessarily don't, everything that I bring, some of the work is politically loaded, some of the sites are politically loaded. But when I bring it into the studio and I kind of wrestle with it, there is a kind of rough beauty that starts to emerge, or something more than the site that it came from. I'm sure that I'm working that out for myself. I'm sure that as a 6-year-old being, beat up and not having much value, I'm sure that that determination to keep moving on, that determination to still have value, to be somewhere, that is the same thing. That kind of tenacity. And so I think it's the same thing in the studio. No matter where the work comes from, I always wrestle it to whatever I need for it to be, and the artwork has to always win.
Beautifully said.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's what it's how I've lived my life.
The artwork always has to win is, I can't imagine a more valuable lesson for a young artist. That's amazing. Okay, number 5. You talk about pacing yourself with a work, being patient, that it takes time for the light to come from within the painting. Is there a meditative aspect to your process? If so, can you elaborate on your experience through the process? And if not, can you describe the physical process and what that requires mentally?
There is a patience that has to happen when you're making a painting, just because of the drying time, just because of the unknown, because of the layers and layers of paper. I don't do a lot of meditation and sitting back and with a cup of tea. I really don't work that way. I probably fast when I'm working. I don't do anything. I barely drink water. I'm a nervous artist. I can't, so I have to work on 3 or 4 paintings at one time. One's in the beginning stage, 2 or 3 are in the beginning stage. There's 3 or 4 in the middle stage, and I'm finishing up some, or I'll overwork a painting. If I only have one painting in my studio, I just overwork it. I'll overwork it. And also scale. I actually very comfortable working large because it just takes more time. I can work on the left side when the right side is drawing, and I can work on the top when the bottom is drawing. So I can move around a lot. That moving around a lot, now that really does come from being a hairstylist. One person comes in, you kind of shampoo them, you put them under the conditioner, put them on the dryer. Another person walks in, you kind of forgot about, and you're like, hey girl, what's up? And you sit her in the chair, and you cut the hair first, then you look, and the color on the third client, rinse her off and put the toner on it, and you just kind of go like that. So that bouncing between things is super comfortable for me, like super comfortable for me. It's just, I can multitask really easily. Like I could probably style everyone's hair in here at the same time. You know, you kind of start yours, and then you kind of cut yours, and then you kind of give him a conditioner because you're running a little bit late, and you kind of, she walks in, you're like, oh God, there's a lot of hair. Hey girl, what's up? Sit over here, and you kind of, I'm gonna give you a color for free because you're running behind, and then over here you're like, I'm gonna cut his hair really quick because it's easy. Like you bounce, you know, and you just kind of, and if I really look at my work, I kind of do the same thing on the surfaces. If you look at some of my paintings, it's the sum of its parts. It's like Los Moscos. It has all these sites, and they're connected. And it's almost like in a hair salon, every single person is connected in there, but they're actually all their different orbits. When I talk to you, I'm talking to you. I'm looking at you. All my focus is on you. What we're talking about is, this is it. And then I come to the next one. I have really intense focus. I can focus on who I'm with. And that comes from the hair salon. But I take it, and I can do the same thing when I'm working on paintings. Sometimes when I'm working on paintings, I start calling it the shop. Like, I'll say, oh, I have to go to the shop. I mean, because there's so many works that I'm working on, and I'll put this on, and sometimes I'll even start to like talk to myself in like beauty salon like, okay, girl, I'm gonna just put this on paper on you and let you dry, and then I'm gonna go over here and see if this color's gonna be okay, and I don't know what to do with that hair, and sometimes my assistant said, what are you doing? And I say, I'm just kind of calming myself down. I do that.
So it sounds like it's more of a physical thing, but it's a physical process that puts you in the moment in a really intense way.
Yes, it's a physical process where I can bring my cognitive thinking and my hand into the same place to super focus.
Beautiful. Okay, so you mentioned the studio, and this was an extra question, but I think we have time for it. Please give us insight into the studio environment. It has been, it has to be an energized and active place given the scale and ambition of your work. But I also understand that everyone wears white to cut back on distractions. Can you talk about how you orchestrate that?
It is true. Our day-to-day, you know what? It's really like a shop where you make donuts. I mean, I'm always the first one there. Like I always say, it's time to make the donuts. I get up really early. I'm usually the first one there. We all wear white, and it's true, it does cut down on distractions, but at the same time, if you go to Home Depot, the only clothes they sell are painter's clothes. So I just started picking up all of the Dickies painter's clothes, and it was easy. So after a while, it just kind of made sense. Also, you can just collapse into the landscape as a house painter. Nobody knows when I'm walking through Home Depot or just walking. They just think, oh, it's a group of house painters, like a group of house painters. So it's a way of like disappearing into the landscape. But really, I don't really have a lot of assistants. I think I have 3 that work with me all the time, and we do really large-scale work. Sometimes we travel and do big. We just work harder. I don't really like a lot of people's hands on the work because I can't really see it. But usually in the morning, I'm usually there by 7. We probably started early. We break for lunch. We all eat together. It's generally always working. I mean, we might have a meeting to talk about things, and everybody tells me their opinions. I do what I want, but they all tell me. It is like a shop. I mean, we work. I work when I'm nervous. I work when I'm sure. I work when I'm stressed, I guess. I work when there's deadlines. But I always work, and we always work, and we tend to work. They ask me questions. I go in the back and I handle business if I have to, and knock on the doors. It's pretty organic. Well, no, it's very structured, but within the structure, there's a lot of organicness. Sometimes I'm working with Diego one day, the next day I'm working with Ginger, next one we bounce. Everybody's kind of cross-trained a little bit. I make sure that everybody's kind of cross-trained. Everyone kind of knows and understands what everybody else is doing. Everything's rotated. We don't, the laundry is rotated, the kitchen is rotated. We just take a week. We all, wash, and it's all, it's very kind of, we have like a lot of equality, It's like we all work together. Some have MFAs, some don't, we all just, if emergencies happen in their lives, we're all there for each other. I always want to know. Some have worked for me a really long time. Some really, some have been there 19, 18, now they're in their 30s. We travel as a pack, usually, all over the world, yeah. It becomes like a family, it really does. It becomes like a family. And you're there for them, and they're there for you. It's between the good, the bad. Yeah, I'm just grateful for them because I can't do all this alone. And they give me confidence. Sometimes I'm standing there, and I really sometimes don't. Sometimes I'm giving myself permission to do something on a canvas or to make a sculpture, I'm hesitant. And I kind of stand there and say, I'm not sure. Then I just go get Diego. I said, Diego, you think I can do it? Yeah, do it, yeah. let's roll. Okay, So you have people there that can kind of just support you, and that's been kind of great. And we've all kind of gone together. From I've worked with some since 20 years. When I was just in a little storefront as big as this gallery, so we've all gone together, which makes it different. Same group. So that makes it really nice, because when you're in that environment, you're just Mark, crazy Mark. Take that brush out of his hand, which is nice. I mean, it's nice. So you have this kind of long history with each other and growth with each other, and that makes it almost feels like I just got out of grad school, which is like there's still enough play. But sometimes actually they start sounding more like okay, Mark, you got a couple shows that we need to start thinking about. I'm like roller skating around, like let's make a movie, let's take the camera and make a movie. And they're like, well, Mark, we got to start thinking. Oh yeah, right. So I always have like a 60-40, 60 where I do professional work, and 40 where I just play with things that I'm interested in, ideas that I'm interested in. I really protect that 40%. Every artist should have a slice of the pie that is just for exploration and play, and not about the market, and not about anything other than your exploration. You should, like if it's a pie, make sure you cut out a slice.
Because without that slice, the well runs dry.
Without that slice, the well is going to run dry. So you have to really, and I love that. I actually love working on ideas that I'm more sure of. They're relationships that are more down the road, more solid, more who I am. But I love that part where you're just kind of playing around, following things you're interested in. You don't know where it goes, and that's okay. I love that.
2 more questions? 1? Okay. I'm going to take a chance and ask 2 more questions, if we can, in the time frame. Can you talk a little bit about Still Pressin', the new piece that's here, the newest piece?
Yeah.
Stunning.
Yeah.
And that up with so much courage of that and the other piece in that huge gallery. That just seems like it honors both of those pieces so much. But I think the newest piece, people might want to know a little bit more about that, just because it's the newest piece.
Yeah. Still Pressing was something that I think the original name was. It wasn't Still Pressing. Maybe it was Pressing or Pressing Agnes, right? Which was a nod to Agnes Martin. I always like to do something site-specific when most of the work is kind of borrowed. I wanted to do something. Originally, I did this at a gallery in Los Angeles, and I was really moving away from the end papers, and I was really thinking about murals, the history of murals and kind of political murals. Less murals, more murals I saw were more figurative, and they had kind of more social and political content. And I thought, what if I kind of made my own version of a mural using this kind of in-paper work? And so I did it on a gallery wall, and actually that was the only thing for sale. That was the only thing in the gallery. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. And that's what I was interested in at the time. So at this moment, I actually wanted to recreate it. I didn't want to use the same wall color, but I wanted to create it. And so we decided to kind of have a relationship with this sort of massive work that was in the Venice Biennale, just a relationship to it. And so I constructed it here, but I used I never used these kind of these glowing lumosity laden pearl. I've never used that before, so I thought, let's try that. And really, you just start playing with the grid. You start laying down the grid, and and it all kind of comes back to you. What I love is how the only trace that's visible is the outline of where you've burned, and everything else just collapses into the architecture. So it really starts to feel like these frames or barbed wire or something. And it really harkens back to the very first painting that I did, I think Enter and Exit, the New Negro for the Studio Museum in 2000 that kind of, it has a delicate agitation on the surface. It's really, one side, still pressing, is really about this delicate surface, and across from it is about this depth way down. So it's interesting, one is very delicate on the surface and one is this kind of depth. And if you look at, they really span they span my career. One was really starting surface and kind of tentative, and 20 years later, it's just this deep, where you just dive into this still waters that run deep. So I really thought that was a good play on both sides of me, because they're both kind of me.
I'm even thinking about your dress. This is kind of off the record, but I'm even thinking about early on, you know, if I go back and I would look at images of you, you're wearing all white. Yeah. And now you usually wear all black.
I do. You know what? I wear white. I actually, you know what? I wear white actually, but when I travel, I tend to wear black because it's easier. It really is. When you're on the road, if you just wear some black, it's easier. But generally, I still wear white. On the road, it's easier just to wear black.
Well, there's my superficial question for our day. That was what you wear.
No. Oh,
okay.
no.
The last question: what has been the biggest surprise, or what is your favorite thing about the Modern's current exhibition, Mark Bradford and Papers?
Oh, you know, that is interesting. What is the biggest surprise when I looked at this exhibition? How thoughtful but yet tentative I was. I mean, I could really see me, you know, trying to figure it out before your eyes. I mean, really, I was, I just took this material and just started trying to figure out my own relationship to it, and my career and art history and where I came from and what that meant, and power and anger and what I wanted to show, and I just could see it trying to be worked out on the surfaces. And also, I didn't know how perfect the Dancing in the Streets video for the show is without the sound. Oh, I never would have thought that. What I can really see is I'm like the tortoise. People think I'm the hare, but I'm actually not the tortoise. I think if you just laid out every painting that I ever made, you would just see me kind of, the next one I made a little bit of a breakthrough, and a little bit of a breakthrough, and a little bit of a breakthrough. I peel back the onion very, very slow. Everybody does. Please. You think you're going to go on Instagram and tell everybody who you are, and then you're sitting in front of them. Tell me, that's not how humans work. We're guarded. And then we peel it back very slow when we feel safe. So when I look at this, I see me just, you know, peeling it back just a couple of onion skins back, just a little bit. That did surprise me. And how present I feel when I look at the work. I remember every single one of these relationships. I remember the ones that were the painting in back of you. I can remember working on it, and I can remember the material, and I can remember I used a different silver paper. And I remember 3 o'clock in the morning, I jumped out of bed. I was living in the studio, so jumping out of bed was in the studio. And I went around the corner to look at it. And I thought that I had ruined it. And actually, it turns out that I didn't. I'm always, whenever I finish a painting for the day, when I go home, I'm actually convinced that it's not a good painting. I'm not opposite. I think it's bad. When I come in the morning, I go, oh, it's not as bad as I thought. Or I go, oh, yeah, it is bad. So I can remember every single trial and tribulation that I went through in every single one of these relationships. I call them relationships because that's all they are. Every single one of the work, if your work is honest, it's a relationship. And you go from flirting at the bar, eye contact, all the way to divorce court. You never want to see each other again. Goodbye. That's what an honest relationship is. You go through everything. And so some good, some you thought were going to be easy and a little more difficult. Some you thought were difficult, were going to be easy. But I can remember every single, so for me, it's almost like a reunion of relationships. Like 14 people you've had a relationship with in one room. I'm like, oh Lord, that's a lot of people. But most of them were good. Most of them were okay.
That's perfect. Slow and steady wins the race.
Really, slow ones, is there really any other way?
Agreed.
There really isn't any shortcuts. It really isn't. We can say there are, but if I want my skin to look a certain way, it's not the filter that's going to do it. I just kind of have to get out there and put a little circulation so that I get a little blood circulating so that I can, it's not a shortcut. There's not that much shortcuts. Well, there's not shortcuts that last, put it that way.
That was beautiful. That's the most fun I had in a long time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That was good. You're good. You're good, actually, because you're able to you pull, like, come on with that, like, keep going with that one.
Well, thank you. You have a lot to say, so that made it easy. You know that thing about the grid right on? Like, if we were just having a conversation, I would have thrown this in. You saw me, like, dying to, like, just keep back and forth, but I was told, shut it up. Yeah, be quiet. Because I'm not going to be on the tape. It's going to be all, like, pulling things from this. But Cam Shep, early in our relationship, it was one of the things that impressed me about him is just the way he thought. We were talking about human nature, and he said, the grid comes out of human nature because he said, it's a way of making order out of chaos.
Absolutely.
It's a survival instinct.
That's exactly what I was like, I'm not, what's wrong? I'm good with it.
Yeah. Like on a battlefield, the chaos of a battlefield, the first thing they do when they come in is start to line them up.
Of course.
Line those bodies up.
Yeah.
So it's horrific beyond imagination,
and
the only way to deal with it
is a grid. Yeah, it made sense, complete sense to me on some emotional level. Still love it.
Your work feels so human, and people think the grid, I think that was the argument against it, that wasn't life, But I think, in fact, it's our way of dealing with life.
It's our way of dealing with it and trying to find some order around, like the chaos of life, a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was okay with it. Never had a problem with it. All the critique was, whatever.
Yeah.
Every painting, usually, if you turn it around, that's all it is. That stretcher bar.
Yeah, it's a grid. Yeah. Who are we kidding?
Like, who are we kidding? Turn it around, and there it is.
All right. I think at one point I tapped my thing when I was tapping my heart on something he said. So my apologies if it comes out.
Great.
Really, was it okay?
It was fantastic. Yeah. Let me get it. Yeah,
Thank you.